Just a quick disclaimer before this podcast starts. Receiving the audio from Missy, there was an issue on my end. So that audio came with some gaps in between her speaking. I have tried fixing this as much as possible, but you will notice that throughout this episode, there's still little gaps in between. I can only apologize and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back to PACHALKUP. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Missy. Hi Missy, how are we doing?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me on.
It's all good. I always love to ask that question to Americans because you are always great. But if you let us know who you are, what you do, and how you got to the position that you're in.
Sure. I guess I'll start from the beginning. I'm Missy Mitchel-McBeth, like you said. I started my career as a high school volleyball coach. I got put in charge of our off-season weight room and realized I had no idea what I was doing. And so I went to the football strength coach there on campus, and he kind of took me under his wing. And I realized that being a strength coach is full time is what I wanted to do. So I went back and got a master's degree. Did an internship with Zach Dakin at TCU. Got hired on there and was at the D1 level in total for 7 years, primarily working with volleyball, women's basketball, and women's golf. After that time period elapsed, I wanted a little bit more work life balance. So I transitioned back to the high school level as a head strength and conditioning coach at Byron Nelson High School, which is a big school in the Dallas Fort Worth metro area. I currently work by day in sales for an equipment company called Powerlift. And then I also run my business, Missy Mitchel-McBeth Sports Performance, where I'm the director of sports performance at a volleyball club here in the Dallas area. I do consulting for coaches education. So I do in-services, speaking engagements, consulting, program audits. And then I also just published a book called Developmental to Division One, which basically takes my 20 years of learning across all of those different contexts and distills it down to a really simplified strength and conditioning book, mainly targeting sport coaches who have to act as a strength coach on their campus.
As a strength coach, we deal a lot with Excels, spreadsheets, and building out the best program that we can for our athletes. Although, when you have these large amount of spreadsheets and Excels and printables and packs that you need to hand out to your athletes, it can get a little bit overwhelming, especially with large amount of files. Mine's personally has crashed, deleted, and that to me is a big burden. That's why since starting my own business, I've went with TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all-in-one programming software that has truly changed and leveled up the way I coach and the way I program for my athletes. With TeamBuildr, you can create customizable workouts, track your athletes' progress in real time, and even generate performance reports with just a few clicks. Athletes can also fill out their own workout data by using either the tablet or their smartphones in the weight room, which, most importantly, eliminates the paperwork that we all hate. This also gives your athletes accountability for their program and their progress as they are immersed within it. If you are interested in using TeamBuildr, head over to teambuildr.com and sign up using code PACHALKUP. That's PACHALKUP to start your 30-day free trial. And for everyone's reference, this is the book and this is the website. No, and we were kind of talking offline about the book. How was it sort of coming up with the decision to make this book and write this book for obviously the knowledge gap that there currently is?
It was kind of like a multifaceted thing. So, number one, as a strength coach, particularly when I don't want to say I've specialized in a sport, but I'm known for being a volleyball strength coach, probably because I played collegiately. I've coached it. I currently work exclusively with volleyball players. But when you're in that space, you get bombed with a constant, hey, coach, can I get your program? Which we all know, or most of us that have any experience understand, like how wildly inappropriate it is to just pass out your program and people try to mimic it in their own context because they don't have the same athletes setting all that stuff. So I'm getting bombed with those questions and having to answer the same thing over and over again. And so it's like, you know, part of it's a little selfish of, hey, I can just be like, look, buy this book and I'm going to answer all those questions for you. But also, those are pain points, right? Those are
Mm.
common questions that people have in the industry that they, things that they struggle with on a day to day basis. And it's like, my ultimate goal is helping kids, right? Helping athletes. So, how can I help more athletes? Well, I can help more athletes through scaling my knowledge through their coaches, right? Every coach that I educate is 100, 1,000 athletes that are better trained over the course of their career. So, I wanted to put together a resource for those coaches. And having been one of those coaches myself, I understand that, in the US, you're coaching, I'll speak specifically to the state of Texas, you're coaching two sports, the one sport that you know something about. The second sport may be a sport that you've never played, never even seen, and yet you're tasked with doing that. Then you're teaching a class, you're driving a bus, you're attending meetings during your conference period, you're dealing with parents, you're dealing with all of these things. And then you go home at night and you're expected to be a spouse, a partner, a parent, a whatever, right? In all of that time, where are you also supposed to learn how to be the strength coach, right? So based on, my prior experience in that role and understanding that there was a big gap in knowledge for that population, I put together a resource that I thought would best serve their needs. And I did it in I've written several articles for Simply Faster if people want to get like a quick, like 5 to 7. This is the tone that I write in. I also wanted to make it an easy read and a fun read for people because I'm sitting next to a bookshelf and I've got probably, 30 strength and conditioning books on it. And they're all written like just matter of fact, plain and dry. And that's cool because there's great information, but I wanted mine to be a little bit more fun. And then the other distinguishing factor is that they're all written with an ideal world in place. They're not written with, okay, my kid forgot their shoes today. Now we only have 25 minutes to train. How do we pivot? Or, we've got 4 weight room racks and 60 kids. How do we work around those things? So I wanted to make the book a little bit more practical to, again, just address the pain points that high school coaches or even club coaches or private sector coaches face on a daily basis.
I think that's the most impactful thing as well, because like you just mentioned, you're not just impacting your athletes, you're impacting anyone that either reads the resources, athletes, and everyone that comes after that. I suppose like it's like a cascading effect. What was that one thing that you saw apart from obviously coaches asking you for their programs that you're like, yeah, this is to be addressed in a long sort of formed method?
Honestly, all of it. From a volleyball perspective, you have this like weird, like, we want their vertical jump to improve, but oh my God, like we can't get in the weight room. Like we can't like actually go in and produce force and get stronger, right? Like you have these kind of old school stereotypes. And so I wanted to get around that. And I wanted to get around the stereotypes of like, okay, let's just condition and like everything in strength and conditioning is about hard work, right? And I love the Tony Holler quote, performance is more important than hard work. I actually quote that in my book. So I wanted to show like, hey, here's what strength and conditioning isn't. Like, here's all these, I think it's like 6
Mm,
stereotypes. Here's what it's not. Now here's what it is. Now here's how I address what it is in my training program. Now here's how I build that out around my different context, right? Because every school that I consult with has a very different model. Like they have a different, if everyone in the school is using the weight room, well, you may not get a Monday, Wednesday, Friday high low model. It doesn't work
mm,
because you don't have that time to go in the weight room. And so just understanding that everybody's situation is a little bit different. The other big thing with volleyball, and really this applies to baseball, softball, soccer is notorious for this. Really, every sport except American football is played year round. It's year round competitive schedules. So it's like you have all these coaches who come from an American football background and they have a mindset of they're not playing a high school season right now. So it's off season. So let's train them like it's off season. And it's like,
mm.
no, 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 their club season or their select season is more intense than their high school season is. So, how do we work around that situation where I have either a year round athlete from a single sport perspective, or maybe I'm training a variety of different team sport athletes in the same group? One has a game tonight, one doesn't. How do I address those situations?
I think you've just touched on a really amazing point, and it's like the year-round seasons. And I was a rugby athlete. We kind of had the summer off, and then we'd go back. August time. So we had like off season and then we had preseason. But for athletes who are all year round, what are some of the fundamental things to get right in their program so that they are fit and healthy for every other aspect of their life as well?
Yeah, the sport comes first. I hate to say that, and people don't like to hear that, but I saw a situation where one of the top players in the country last year. I've got people telling me like, okay, this is what she's doing in her high school off season. Then she goes to a tournament, she blows her ACL out that weekend, and I'm like, we if we want to take this like I'm in charge front seat mentality as a strength coach. And of course, like, no, I'm not saying like A caused B. Like, we all know there's a million factors that go into injury. But as a strength coach, like, I have to take pause and look at that and say, if I send an athlete into a tournament sore and fatigued and they became injured, what would have happened if I would have scaled my training back a little bit? So, again, sport comes first, athlete comes
Mhm.
first, really is a better way of saying that. With that, you know, again, I came from the collegiate level. I'm programming for a collegiate program right now. That volume is higher. Okay. That scratches my strength coach itch. I would have these really clean, nice off season. We would make all these gains, like, and then we go into season and I scale back training and all that. Like, makes me just like feel good as a strength coach. The high school level, it chronically looked like an in season training program. And at first, that was really hard for me to adjust to because I was like, we're not getting stronger, we're not getting better. But I think what you have to look at is the concept of accumulation. Okay. Maybe I'm not progressing my volume that's on my projected 1RM or whatever it is, but am I accumulating quality training over time, moving the needle on how much volume of play can they handle and setting them up for success at the next level when they are going to have an in-season and off-season training cycle. So for me, that's I guess the big rock there is looking at it from the concept of accumulation because you can't necessarily look at it from the concept of like always adding something.
I had Coach Stephanie Grubbs, previously known as Stephanie Mock, um, and she touched on sort of all year round and how she microdoses her athletes. Is that something similar to what you sort of take on through these all season round athletes?
Um, I'll speak to what I did at the high school level. With that, I had 20 different groups that I was working with. So I saw each group 1 to 2 times a week. It's very difficult to microdose because when I think of the concept of microdosing, it's spread out over,
Hmm.
3 to 5 training days. And I was getting 1 to 2 training days. So we would have to kind of stress consolidate on that day and like, this is where we're going to get our lift in. Okay. But they have a tournament coming up for this age group. I'm going to scale. And I talk about this in my book. I have like a chart on how I would modify it based on coming out of a tournament, having a tournament the upcoming weekend, or having no tournament, with 3 different athletes in that room having to do 3 different programs or whatever. But kind of got off on a tangent there. So
No,
that
keep
wasn't
going.
really yeah, that wasn't really yeah, that's not really microdosed in my opinion. However, what I'm doing with this collegiate program right now is they're training Monday through Thursday and they have games Friday and Saturday. So it's like Monday we've got like 10 minutes of the pre-practice warm up is going to have like some light tier plyos and some accelerations in it, right? So we're getting our speed stimulus there. Then after practice, they're doing a 30-minute lift. So they're doing like literally 4 lifts and then they're out.
Mm.
I think two of which it's sitting over here in front of me. That's why I'm looking. I just
Yeah.
I just finished writing it and it's getting sent off at 1 o'clock today to the coach. But anyway, 2 major lifts, 2 auxiliary lifts out the door. Tuesday, we're coming back in, we're lifting again. We're doing a lot of ISO stuff, a lot of body weight stuff, a lot of prehabby type stuff. Wednesday is probably our bigger lift day, but again, like we're not stacking on a lot of volume. Thursday, I posted this on Twitter the other day. We're moving shit quick because it's the day before a game, right? So we're doing some power complexes, a couple of sprints, and getting out. So again, like our total volume's really low and it's just spread out across the day or across the week. So absolutely, like I think microdosing is a fantastic way to accumulate volume across a week, a year. It just wasn't feasible in my high school setting.
Mhm.
In some high school settings, it's structured where kids come in for PE classes and they have them 5 days a week. that's a perfect opportunity to microdose. That just wasn't my experience when I was working at the high school level.
Yeah. You've just sort of talked about um like neurological prep work before games. Is that something that you implement quite a lot for your athletes?
So I'm just now coming back to working with the collegiate level a little bit, and I'm doing that, as I just alluded to, I'm doing that as a consultant. So I'm not on campus. I'm
Mhm.
programming. I'm sending videos. I'm communicating with the coach. I'm actually going to meet my athletes for the first time tomorrow. I'm going to go to one of their games because they've requested to meet me because they like the workouts. But with the high school level, we not really. I have to ask, people are like, oh, these priming sessions and game day lift for high school athletes. I'm like, how much are we really getting with a 50% clean or 50% speed squat out of an athlete that's not developed in any way, shape, or form? I don't think the answer is much. I think that's one of those like trendy buzz things that people who've never worked at a higher level see higher level coaches doing and think like, oh, that's the move. I think that there are certainly applications to game day or day before a game lifting sessions in the developmental setting because, like I said, like your training program is structured based on how the weight room calendar is set up, not based on what's optimal or ideal, but based on that's your allotted weight room time. So yeah, move shit fast on that day because we don't want to move shit slow and heavy and make them sore and then coach is
Yep.
breathing down my neck the next day because we lost a game, right? And then I think there's also some placebo effect there of like, hey, we're getting you guys ready for game, you're going to feel really good, and the kids are like, yeah, I do feel good. So I think my friend Monty Sparkman's talked about, for him it was less the game day lift stuff, the primer sessions was less a physiological thing and more of a cultural thing. So again,
Mm.
I think everything's how you apply it. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. As long as you have a reason, as long as it works for your group, which is kind of my overarching training philosophy on everything.
100. There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and this
Yep.
is why I love speaking to different coaches because like we all uniquely skin that cat. Like I spoke to a coach yesterday, and he's very much into the cognitive aspect of priming his athletes, which I'm really getting into for the simplicity that it fatigues just more than your body. Like your mind's getting fatigued at the same time, and I think that's maybe where more of this industry is going. um but like I will always say like the simplest of programs is the ones that probably work best in our industry. Like you don't need like these Instagram, TikTok super complex workouts to make your athletes great. Get them moving, get them squatting, hinging, push pulls, knee dominant movements, and you're good.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I address that exact concept. Like I think on the last page of my book, I think I say something along the lines, it's rarely the coach with the most complex program, and it's very often the coach that has the best execution of the simplest program that sees the biggest return on investment. Because the reality is, at the end of the day, we all squat, we all hinge, we all push, we all pull, right? And then you look at even at the highest level, like professional sports, the amount of energy that it takes to
Mhm.
make the 0.01% technical or tactical gain, the cost of that is so high. They don't have time to do little, it may work, it may not, like small return on investment, fancy shit in the weight room. Like they have to move, do the same simple things that they know are going to work, because again, like the cost of doing business on the field is so high for them.
And that 0.01% is still a really good improvement at the very elite level. Like because they're so in tune with everything that they do, that 1% can literally mean the difference between like a bronze and a gold. Like it's that minuscule of a difference in how it makes you perform. And to me, like that's what excites me so more about like we've just had the Olympics is like you see these athletes who work for 4 years to really hone in their performance. For I think it was Usain Bolt that said it. But he was like, I worked for 4 years to run 9 seconds, and that's nuts.
It is. It is. And imagine being the coach that is responsible for the improvements of 9 seconds over the course of 4 years. Not a responsibility I have ever had, and not one that I think that I would want.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like volleyball, you have to be so explosive but durable at the same time. How does that sort of pan out throughout the year for you?
I think, and I was just having a conversation this morning, like I saw something that was like, there's no reason to ever condition a volleyball player in season. And I'm like, just because you don't know how to appropriately apply conditioning doesn't mean I don't know how to appropriately apply conditioning, because really, like, conditioning's gotten a pretty bad rap of like, everybody thinks that like medium intensity, like, ugh,
Mhm,
throw up, feel the burn, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, like what we're doing on, like I referenced my collegiate program on Tuesdays, like we're doing a lower intensity conditioning session because aerobic capacity is actually important in the sport of volleyball to help me recover in a 5 set match that may last 2.5 hours, where I have to repeat output after output after output. If I go into that fifth set and I don't have any gas in the tank,
mhm,
I've got a problem. And the notion that, well, they're playing games, they're doing this, they're doing that. A game is not a game, right? Like if I go and I beat the high school program that I used to work with, we'd go in and roll up teams in 3 sets, like 25-10. That's not a game. Like they're not getting any stimulus out of that. They've hardly even had a practice. It's over in 30 minutes, right? So if you do that week after week, and then all of a sudden playoffs hits, and suddenly you're expected to play a 5 setter where it's point for point, you're not conditioned from that. You're
mhm,
not conditioned from practice, because practice is, again, it's a lot of technical, it's a lot of tactical install, and a lot of coaches don't know how to program conditioning into their practice. And if we're expecting that to just happen as strength coaches, I think we're doing an athlete a disservice. Now, the flip side of that is that if you're being an idiot and just fatiguing athletes through conditioning, and you don't understand that like there's physiology going on and what adaptations are we chasing, that's its own problem. But like you said, like conditioning is important, and kind of how I address that is, you know last night as an example, I had my high school athletes in, and we were going to I'm building, everybody's always like, oh, what's a good conditioning test for volleyball? And I'm like, there's kind of not one. That's really very good. I think everybody would agree. Like, I've always kind of used like the yo-yo intermittent test, because it's like, well, we've got a lot of normative data. I can compare you now to you 2 months ago, which to me is what conditioning testing should be about, is about seeing improvements versus hitting a set metric. But anyway, so I'm building out a test, and I've told my kids, I'm like, listen, like y'all are participating in science experiments, like you referenced before we actually started recording, like lab rats.
mhm,
There are times that I lab rat my kids, but I tell them that that's what's happening. And at the end of the session, I'm like, hey, how do we feel? Scale of 1 to 10, whatever. And they're like, oh, that was too easy, too hard, whatever. So, but I'm looking at them, and they all push really hard on Sunday. Monday, we come in, we do a lot of like mobility stuff, we do a lot of rehab stuff. We get them moving, we get them ready for their game on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, we come back and hit it pretty hard, but I could tell that they were gassed from the week leading up. So it's like I had plan A for conditioning, and I just scaled it back a little bit, right?
mhm,
Like we hit 1 set instead of three and got out the door. So I think if you're monitoring what's going on with your athletes, which I don't see their practice loads, I'm relying on them. I'm relying on what they
mhm,
look like when they walk in the door. To make those decisions. But there are ways to intelligently dose in conditioning, because it is important for volleyball as well as other sports. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, we're the sprint based, or we do only, yeah, we sprint too. We get faster, we jump higher, we do all those things, but we also support that with conditioning. And the other
mhm,
piece to it is, it's not just that game that we're talking about. It's the recovery from the game. It's the autonomic balance that we create through better conditioning, that they're sleeping better, they're recovering better day to day. And so again, I think we are doing an athlete's a disservice also from a health perspective
mhm.
by not addressing that part of our job description, which is strength and conditioning, in case people forgot.
100%. Um, to that point, I'll piggyback. I was once having a discussion with someone, and quarterbacks and conditioning got brought up as to why they have to do it. And I tried to explain it as simple as possible. It was like, okay, they're not running back and forward like every other athlete, right? But if you think about the amount of pressure that they go through as soon as that ball is snapped, and they have to do that throughout the whole game. They still need that conditioning to be able to think and process everything that's going on in the field at a rate that lets them be at that Division One level, at the pro level. So for me, it was like they need that conditioning to just think, to just see what's going on and really be able to express their position in that way. And as a disservice if we're not conditioning, like you alluded to, there's loads of different ways you can condition them, and you can't really say, oh yeah, this is what works throughout. But if you do, like you mentioned, the yo-yo test, if you do some type of conditioning drill, like whether it's like a Tabata or um the Bronco or something, the more you test them at it, the more normative data you're going to get for that single group. To then you can be like, oh yeah, we're improving. Oh, actually, we're regressing. Let's figure out why. So, conditioning for all athletes is important, and I frequently talk about the dark side of sport, whereas like you sometimes need to experience that complete darkness in case you have to deal with that during the game. Like there's some games that I've played, I was like, this is rough. Like I'm going through it, and I need to make it out. But how if I've not got the energy or the pace to keep up with the same demand of that game?
Yeah, and I mean, I like not at any kind of level anymore, but like I still play beach volleyball, and there's, we talk about this all the time. Like, there's these just long rallies, like super, super long rallies that go on. And I'm like, man, can somebody just get up and put the ball away? Like, end our suffering, right? But it's like, you have to have a level of conditioning to like, or like what you're talking about, like the cognitive awareness of like, if I'll just get up and hit the spot, right? Like I'll go high line over the block or whatever it is. My suffering ends and I can move on to the next play. But again, like you have to have some ability to like fight through that stuff, or else you can't even have those thought processes because you're so much in fight or flight mode. Um, yeah.
No, I agree. And by the way, I love that you're still putting out training and like volleyball content, because like it shows like, and I love when I see coaches expressing their human side. Like it's not just coaching in business. Like you can still see how much fun you have playing volleyball.
Yeah, I mean, like the preface of my book, like tells the story of the first time that I ever picked up a volleyball. And like as soon as I held it in my hands, I'm like, I don't know why, but I just like it. And I've played it for 30 years now, right? And, at 42, you start to see things decline. You're just not like your elasticity is a little less. You like getting up off the ground is a little harder. Like, I don't care who you like. I'll see people all the time that they're like, yeah, I mean, like 40 is not old, and like I'm gonna be able to train until, and I'm just like, you're 30, shut up. Like, and the same thing like that I would say to a 50-year-old, like the 50-year-old is gonna be like, come on, Missy, like you don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I do still love the sport. I think it still gives me again, I'm not playing at any kind of level. Like we're playing at 6:30 in the morning for fun before work starts. But I think it gives me a little bit of like, I mean, I can laugh at myself. One, like I almost never post me doing anything good on the volleyball court. I post stupid clips, and my athletes think it's funny. They think it's cool. I still play. I can talk to them about a skill, and they understand that I get it. So yeah, and I think that kind of gets into the topic of like, should strength coaches still compete, or should they still be able to do all the same things? I've always found it helpful for myself, but I also just really love the sport, and have a sport that I can play, until I'm 70 years old. But I don't think it's a necessity in our field.
I agree in that it's very important to like, so anything that I program I have to do. Like I'm never going to program for an athlete something that I've not done, because I don't know what it feels like. I don't know if it's too easy, too hard. Like I need to know exactly what they're going through. But if my athletes see that me doing it as well helps them be like, oh yeah, like he also trains, he knows what we're doing. Like I like to experience and experiment with myself as well. Like I personally love the 10-10-12s. 4 minutes of work, 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and you're just going like full out for the 10 seconds, rest for 10. And anytime that I give an athlete that to do, I always know when it starts sucking. And then I can start encouraging, then I can start bringing in that, right? This is what's happening. Like we can make it through it. You've got more in there. Let's push as hard as we can. You've got it. and that relationship helps them to see like he's not just push, push, push. He can also know what's happening. So like for me, playing sports and competing and still making sure that I'm able to do these movements is very important in my program at least.
Yeah, and I mean, you get where, like, because I was always, I'll be able to demonstrate all this until whatever, and then it's like, I've racked up enough injuries at this point where I've learned this past season. I'm like, I'm not going to demo a push up anymore, like not even one, because both my shoulders are blown out. So it's like, now what do I have? I have an assistant that's going to demonstrate it for me, or one of my athletes, right? But on the whole, it's like, yeah, I agree with that point of, to the best of my ability, I'm going to try to do things. And that's again why I like to continue playing a sport, is I think it reminds me, like, what does it feel like to play 3 days in a row and your body's just wrecked? What does it take to recover from that, so that instead of just being this, like, person, like, barking orders, again, you are human and you can, like, I'll do, with my summer training group, we were doing on, I forget what day of the week, but we were doing some deep tier plyos at the end as kinda like a conditioning, like 10 on, 10 off, kinda similar style. 6 rounds through, and I was like, "You know what? For solidarity, I'm gonna do these with y'all." And, like, I
Mm.
played, like, 2.5 hours that morning and, like, got in there and did it with them, and I'm like, my legs are dying, and it just helps you remember, like, that when they're struggling and they wanna stop, like, you're sitting there doing the same thing, like, struggling and wanna stop. So, yeah, I'm with you on that.
I see this is like something that I'm really into is like I have to experiment on things. And like I've brought this up a couple times, but there was a month that I went 50 pull-ups every single day just to see what would happen. Like it was just something fun and challenging that I was like I recorded every day and it was fun. But like it taught me that like you can learn and adapt to different stimulus if you just keep at it for long enough and help your athletes like this is why we're doing it. Like this is what we're chasing. If at the end we don't see that, something happened along the way. And that's fine too.
Yeah, and I think kinda to that point, like, it's, we've talked about, like, being chronically in season and, like, oh, people, "Oh, you can't condition during season," or, "Oh, you can't do plyos during season," but what you just said, you did 50 pull-ups a day. Well, the textbooks over here tell me that I can't do that because I'm training the same muscle group every single day, and I'm like, "Okay, number 1, what do you think we do in sports?" And number
Mhm,
2, like, yeah, you can, as long as you're then not on top of it stacking 8 billion sets of rowing and, sets of other things and auxiliary work. Like, you can train your body to tolerate more load, and that's really what training is about, right? Because again, if, like, at my level, the developmental level, most of my kids, I'm training for life. I'm training for
mhm,
healthy relationship with exercise, wanting to remain fit. But for those few that are going to move on and play at the collegiate level, like, I do need to teach them to tolerate more volume, because that's what they're gonna get in their sport at that level, and that's also what they're getting in their sport right now. So there has to be some point where, I think there's some measure of, we've gone too far in the, like, scaling things back, where it's like, "Oh, well, we don't wanna do this and we don't wanna do that because they're already doing so much," but that's not resulting in any fewer injuries
mhm.
either. So I think we have to just, like I said, with the conditioning piece, or even like with plyometrics, be really, really smart with how we dose those things, so that we're not doing too much, but we're doing enough to actually apply a stimulus.
100%. Me and Stephanie Grubbs spoke about this and it's load management is a term that now gets used to like we need to really be careful what we're doing and scale everything back. And it's exactly what you said. Like we're in this scale back, scale back, scale back. But sometimes we actually need to push harder. Like load management is a term that should be encompassing the low end and the high end. Like I love this um way of thinking. And it's like if you've got an athlete who's benched predominantly most of the game, like he needs to do something at the end because then he's not going to be able to deal with the load in upcoming games or upcoming training sessions. Like an accumulative load throughout week, month, year is just as important as scaling and progressing things.
Yeah, and I actually, that email that I have typed up to send to the coach, like, I have on Thursdays at the end of that session, because it's not a practice day, this is what you need to do with your bench players. Because in the event that their number gets called, exactly what you just said, we need them to be conditioned so that they're not injured, so that they contribute, whatever it is. So, yeah. And I think I saw Andrew Altoff speak this summer, and he talked about how we have gotten afraid to go hard on our hard days, right?
Hmm.
Because said, like Stephanie said, the load management term is flown around so much, but it's like, you've got to go hard, and then you've got to back off when it's time to back off. Otherwise, everything just becomes this like chronic, medium, gross, grindy day. Then conditioning does get a nasty rap because it is ineffective. And that's where, like I mentioned, telling my kids, like, your lab rats today, like I communicate that stuff with my athletes. I'm like, here's what our week looks like. Today, we're going hard. Understand that tomorrow, because we went hard today, I'm going to back off. And you can trust me that I'm going to do what we need to do for your body to get you ready to go hard again, because that's how sports works and that's how games work, right? So I think, again, what she was saying, what Coach Altoff, I heard him speak about this summer, like, go hard on your hard days, go easy on your easy days.
100%. Like, I love active recovery days because you can get just as much out of them as you can like the hardest training session in that block. Like, you like just by keeping moving and keeping the body like active, it just doesn't have that ability to just sit and just like waste. And like that's how I think like active recovery is better than just sitting on the couch and just watching TV. Like you can still do that like afterwards. That's still fine. But like like exactly what you said, like hard days are hard, easy days are easy. I kind of want to touch back on a point that you mentioned earlier based on this. How do you deal with the practice loads that you said that you don't always get to know from your athletes?
I just talk to kids and I have to trust them. I think that comes into, when you've been training an athlete for a while, you know what they look like walking in the door, right? And whether it's, people will be like, oh, well, they just had a bad day or they had a math test or whatever it is. Stress is stress, right? It doesn't matter if it was physical, doesn't matter if it was cognitive, doesn't matter if it was emotional. They're walking in the door, they're stressed out. You know what that looks like. You talk to them, you have that conversation. Is that precise? No. I work with middle school and high school age athletes right now. I'm working through a collegiate coach who has a background in working with players to assess their load. And I'm advising on this should be a hard day of practice or whatever. So my process is far from precise, but I've also been doing this for 20 years. So it's like, I was explaining to someone where it's like I'm writing a program kind of blind, but because I've been around the sport so much, I kind of just know what to do. And a
Mhm.
lot of people won't like that. They'll say, well, you don't have tech on them or you don't have this or blah, blah, blah. But you just like, you can just kind of like operate by feel at some point. Um, and,
I
and,
do.
and again, I would love to have technology to like verify my hypothesis on all of that, but I don't. So I've got to do what's optimal in my setting.
We were talking off air about the science and coaching ability from Europe side and the US side, and it's exactly that. It's people get so infatuated with, yeah, but what's your results? Where are you getting this number from? How is that working? Like I need to know everything. But like sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just feel. Like I've got a decade in strength and conditioning. Like I started strength and conditioning when I was 13, and then I started like doing work placement with my coach at 14. I'm now 28, so like I've been in this industry long enough to know like sometimes you just need to push. Like I did a conference in Italy a couple months back, and I was doing something that Coach Mac showed me, and it was like it's this core sort of drill. Takes a couple minutes, but it's just hard, and it just teaches you to push through it. But the guys afterwards like, yeah, but what's the science behind like what's like why did we do it? I was like, because it's hard. And it's like, yeah, but like what's it doing? Nothing. It's just hard, and you're working your core. That's it.
Yeah, and I think like, and I talk about in my book, I'm like hard for the sake of hard workouts or da 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 da. And I do agree with that, but I also agree with what you're saying. Like, sometimes you just need to push people, and sometimes you just need to get, like, let training get a little nasty, right? Not to the point that it's unsafe, but again,
Yeah.
that just goes
Mhm.
back to knowing your athletes, right? Knowing the training. I think the difference is, if I'm gonna put somebody through, like, we would do all these, dumb, like, off-season challenges or whatever, but the kids liked it. They bought into it. There was some team building going on with it, but I also knew exactly where the line was,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'm planning it where it's not interrupting our other training. I'm planning it where I know they're going to get something emotional, mental, whatever out of it. Um, and again, I just know physically where they're at. I'm not walking in on day one, like hitting them with a 1RM test and being like, oh,
Mhm.
you're not mentally tough because you didn't hit whatever. You know what I mean? So I think there's really intelligent ways to push people for the sake of pushing them because, like you mentioned earlier, there's just some times in games where you're going to have to fight through some stuff. And I think that you need to have, it's about having the confidence of having done some hard things before to know that you can do them again.
Mhm. I agree. I think that's true, and I think I spoke to I spoke to Coach Mike Boyle on this. His episode's probably out at this point. Um, but you kind of just need to sometimes just express yourself in whatever way, and like we're we're in an industry where we just need to be humans. Like if as long as we're humans and we keep everything as simple as possible, like our athletes will see the benefits of our programs. Like if a kid comes in and he's like, yeah, I had a fight with my mom. I had a fight with my dad. Like, I broke up with my girlfriend. Like, I'm not going to be a dick to them during that session. Like, I'm not going to yell in their face. I'm just going to be a little bit more mindful of what I'm communicating to him. Because, like, he doesn't need me to be an arsehole on top of everything else he's got going on. Oh, I've got an exam. Okay, load's going to be less. Like you said earlier, stress is stress. So, why am I going to add more stress just to make me feel better? Is that needed?
And that's something that, like, because I am a little older, was, prevalent in the early stages of my career where it's like, no, you need to leave. And I would tell kids, I'd be like, you need to leave your stuff at the door and come in and have a great day, regardless of what's going on outside of here and blah, blah. And then it's like, I had stuff happen in my life. And all of a sudden, it's like, I can do my best to leave it at the door. But at the same time, sometimes you can't. And also, I would far rather a kid bring that stuff into the weight room and let me be privy to that than to hold that stuff inside and have nowhere to go and make a terrible decision as a result or have mental health issues as a result of me being like, "Ugh, we gotta be tough." And, because at the end of the day, like I say this all the time, we teach kids how to play hot potato and tag. It's not that serious.
Mhm.
What is serious is their mental health, their physical well being. And so I think, Coach Boyle hit the nail on the head. Like, yeah, sometimes it's okay to just have a bad day, right? As long as more good, if a kid's coming in like that every single day, well, that's probably a conversation that needs to be had, a
Mhm.
referral that needs to be made. But I think that we need to let people, kids, adults, whoever, like you said, just be a human and express themselves.
100%. I've experienced that where they were just coming in like that every day. And there was nothing going on in the background. It was just them and just the way that they saw the weight room and that relationship, which I was then having to express that to the coaches, and that made me feel uncomfortable because I was like, he's a really good athlete, but he's being lazy. Like he's just not pulling his own weight. So like what you've just mentioned, like that still needs to be addressed. Like that is something that, although it's a hard conversation to have, it will probably do better for that athlete than just leaving it.
Yeah, laziness is its whole other, that's a whole nother thing. And that's one of those deals where sometimes you're just going to have an athlete that's lazy. And generally, that's the highest performing athlete on your team, right? Because
Mhm.
they understand that, everything in, I like like I like behavioral learning stuff, but, everything that we do, every decision on a daily basis is kind of a choice between two things or a couple different things. And so it's like 9 out of 10 times choose the higher value option, right?
Mhm.
So laziness is an active choice that not pushing myself and being comfortable is more appealing to me than whatever maybe benefit that I'm not really sure is going to happen if I push myself, right? Because if I'm already like the best kid on the team or whatever it is, I'm like, I don't need this. I'm
Mhm.
beating the brakes off of these people on the field or court. So why am I going to push myself in here? So I think a lot of us want to have an answer for laziness. But ultimately, sometimes they've just got to, like, what I found helpful on the laziness process is collegiate freshmen getting into their first real practice against teammates that were sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and being like, oh my gosh, Missy was right. This game is 4 times as fast as it was in high school. I'm probably going to need to go a little bit harder, like she said during
Mhm.
our training sessions.
Yeah, and so I've been having this discussion recently, and it's no secret that we probably spend more time with them than their head coach. But in their whole performance, we're a very small piece, and we all, like, most of us have egos, and those egos drive our decisions. I'm like, no, I made this athlete. When in reality, the athlete made it himself or herself. So it's like sometimes I know some athletes that despise the weight room, but like they're playing at the elite of their sport. So like, how much of a difference did I actually make? Like we can prolong their longevity in their sport. We can influence some of the decisions on how they look at health and well-being, but are we actually that important for them to perform what they do?
Yeah, I mean, I had a former athlete participate in the Olympics this summer, and I want to preface with the fact that she's one of the nicest, most pleasant human beings on the face of the planet. But in the weight room, left something to be desired, right? So, and the topic of I thought of her because, like I'd posted something about like volleyball coaches, if you use the time mile as your conditioning test, tell me why, which like nobody has a reason for. They just use it to like weed kids out or whatever. And I was like, if we make kids run an 8-minute mile, I can guarantee you, and I could probably pull a time on her to say, like, no, she never would have made it. So do we get rid of this kid because she played in the Olympics this summer? Like,
Mm,
or I had another volleyball player that she was touching 10-3, 10-4 during her career. But anyway, yeah, I mean, again, like you said, we can make a difference, but I think where we make the difference is kind of that like middle of the road athlete that they are going to have to be more blue collar. They are going to have to work hard. Your high performers are going to perform well. If you can get them to buy in and you can make that 0.01% difference, awesome. But at the same time, like I was talking, I have one kid that I was struggling with last spring that was just extremely lazy. And the coach was like, well, and I was like, I got 25 kids in that session. I can't allocate all of my energy to bringing along that one person. She's going to kind of do her own thing. I'm going to spend my energy like trying to make bigger improvements with the 24 than I am with the one.
yeah,
But yeah, we can only do so much from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a health standpoint, with our athletes. But like you said, yeah, we are just a small piece, and I think we would all do really well as strength and conditioning professionals to remember that, because I think some people tend to forget that.
I agree. You've just mentioned something that I've never really heard before, and I actually love it. The blue collar athlete. Can you
Yeah,
explain like what that
uh,
is and how you came across that?
Yeah, I mean, just, you have these, like, I would say, like, a white collar athlete is like they're the top performer. Like, they're just, Usain Bolt would be a great example, right? Like, he was notorious for not showing up to practice, but yet,
By
who's
his
been a
mom.
better runner?
Yeah.
Name a better runner, right? And so, but then you have these athletes that are self-built or they're built through hard work or whatever. That to me is a blue collar athlete. I Whenever I think of that, I think of was it 2011 that we won the Rose Bowl at TCU, where we had a bunch of like 2 and 3 star football recruits. They weren't 4 and 5 star, but we had a 13-0 season. We won a Rose Bowl, and it was like they were just really gritty kids, like really hard workers, did everything that was asked of them. and it was, they were successful because of it.
Hmm. I've also been really interested in, like, we sometimes, not we personally, but some coaches dismiss athletes because they're not achieving certain metrics. So they just like start weeding them out. But they could be, for example, like these blue collar athletes that if you just spend a little bit more time with them and really help them develop and build that grit into them, that they can be at that level, if not higher as well.
Yeah, I think that gets harder with certain sports. Like for example, and people are going to hate what I'm about to say. That's fine. They're not my words anyway. But I used to work with high school soccer athletes, and I worked with a coach who had played professionally. And he had was very, very successful with the team there. And he would say, I'm down at our middle schools and watching seventh grade girls, and he's like, I can tell right there based on skill level if they're going to ever contribute to us on varsity. And it's not that he wouldn't give the other ones a chance. It's just the skill gap at that point was already so high. So it's like, as unfortunate as it is that we have this year round system, it has built a tremendous amount of skill in some of these athletes. And that, at the end of the day, sports skill is the number one metric that's important, right? Because we don't
Hmm.
squat, we don't go, test our vertical, we don't go test our broad jump out on the field. Surely those pay off in sports skills, but sports skill has to be the number one thing. So while I can go out and work as hard as I was a blue collar athlete. I'm 5'7". I was the first person in my family to play sports. Like I'm not fast. I jumped pretty well, but I wasn't like an exceptional jumper. So for me to play at the NAIA level was a huge accomplishment based on my hard work. But I could have worked 23 hours a day at volleyball and slept one and still never been division 1, right?
Yeah. That's yeah. And I think that's sometimes like where we kind of have to like prepare our athletes for more than just sport. And I think like that's one of the reasons why I love S&C so much. Because like I was one of those athletes where I was blue collar. I had to work for everything and every step that I was at. But at the end of the day, like I got hurt and I got dropped real quick. Like it just moves so much quicker that unfortunately some just get left behind, and then you're like, what now, like what happens now? So like SNC helped me in the sense that I'm able to explore this area now and just like really dive into it as well,
Well, and I
which
think for athletes that, that are a more blue collar athlete that maybe they're never going to see it pay off on the field, I think that we can show them a payoff in the weight room, right? Like they see, oh, I gained 5 more. So they're able to build confidence in a different way. Or, I mean, my book is called Developmental to Division 1. So I'm feeding into the system of like D1 is the only way, right? I think it's also like really important that we celebrate, like people will be like, oh, they're just a D3 athlete. And I'm like, that's great.
mhm,
Like, they made it to college to play, that's amazing because that might have been their highest potential, or not making it to college, but, being a role player as a senior on their high school team, that might have been their highest potential, and those things are perfectly acceptable, and I think that we can show them that in strength and conditioning where we show them that, your hard work is paying off.
mhm. I always like to ask my athletes like who's the leaders of the team, because that might not always be the captain. Like that might sometimes just be that one kid that puts their 110% and like make sure that every athlete in that team comes along with him. And I think that's super important to foster that relationship with them too, because like you already have that connection with everyone else if you've got that kid to buy into what you're doing. You mentioned that you have dodgy shoulders. And going back to an earlier point where I experiment with myself, I was messing around with fat grips. Bench usually sucks for me. Like I've had shoulder surgery, and like anytime I bench, like it just sucks. Like it just feels grindy. I hate it. With fat grips, nothing. I was golden, and like for me, I was like, why? Like why is that happening? That's I thought that was fascinating, and because you've got gammy shoulders as well, I thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, and it's been a journey where at first it was like so I tore my left shoulder diving for a ball in the sand.
Yeesh.
Armpit hit a low pocket in the sand, arm hit a high pocket. Didn't dig the ball, the most disappointing. We did win the tournament, so all was well. Um, and then I tore my right one, not getting my feet in position and overhand digging a ball across my body. So at first, it was like in the initial stages, just doing rehab stuff, whatever, staying away from pressing. And actually, like chin ups hurt, which was weird.
Mhm,
But then I got back to where I was like, okay, I can bench, but I figured out I could either bench or I could play volleyball. If I did both at the same time, it was a problem. So then it's like, cool, I'll go to like neutral grip dumbbell bench and push ups. And just like slowly over time, like those have gotten where they're just no goes for me. So now I've always been able to overhead press fine, just whatever the position of the tear is, tolerates it. So it's like my pressing movements now are a single arm, like a half nail and kettlebell press, and any kind of landmine press variation, I'm fine
mhm.
with. But any horizontal pressing, I'm like, I'm out.
Nice. See, I'm still at the stage where floor pressing is perfect, but press ups are getting that. Yeah.
Yeah, floor press for me because my scap's just pinned against the floor. I just feel like I'm bone on bone, like in
Mhm,
every aspect of
mhm.
my shoulder and scapulothoracic joint. So I'm just like, maybe not.
Yeah. Like this is why I love experimenting with myself, because you find out these little pockets of where like, oh, I can't do that. From writing the book, what's some of the biggest things that you've learned about your programs and how you then adapted to how the industry is going?
Um, yeah, I think the biggest takeaway was like, we all start out, we read books and like we're gonna do everything by the book, right? Because
Mhm,
those are the rules. Like these are our 8 steps to programming, and this is your 5-3-1 program, or you're this or you're that program. And like, oh my gosh, sets and reps, like, what if I get it wrong? So that's really the first thing is like the last thing that I worry about anymore is sets and reps. The last thing because people are like, "What are you doing?" And I'm just like, "I don't care as long as the movement looks good." Now, within that, obviously, I'm programming sets and reps. So that's one is just don't worry so much about like doing the right program, like do the right thing for the athlete in front of you. And that's really the second piece is just you've got to be flexible in your programming and I wish somebody would have told me that when I was
mhm,
26, 27, 28 at the collegiate level, because I probably would have lasted a couple more years at that setting had I not just been so like, dig my heels in on everything. I have to have this amount of training time. I can't make this change. I don't care what you want to do in practice, coach. This is what I have, and this is the best thing, right? Chill out, be flexible, put the sport first,
mhm.
give a little bit, compromise to the sport coach, build that relationship, and then, move I keep saying move the needle, of course, because it's 2024 and we have to use our business terminology. So, like, and then try to like gradually shape that behavior over time with that coach where you are getting a little bit
Mhm.
more time or more done, or maybe you can make some changes in practice. So that's really it is just being more flexible with everything you do, which is very difficult for me because I'm not a flexible human being. Like I want to know when we're doing stuff, how long it's going to take, all of the details. But I think that's probably the biggest one. And the biggest thing, like when, you know, younger coaches will call and be like, "Oh, well, what about this and what about that?" And I'm like, I don't really care about that stuff anymore. Like I don't really care about being on the latest trend
Mhm.
or being this style of coach or that style. It's like I'm just going to put whatever works in my setting, and that's what we're gonna do.
So this is exactly why I've created this podcast. Is like as young coaches, it's quite hard to sometimes get coaches to speak about what they're programming and why they might say, "I don't care, just do something." And it's that thing where because you've got so much experience, it's like I know it doesn't work to be very strict. So I just don't care to be as rigid as possible now. I just like, yeah, you want to decrease this, let's give and take. You can have that if I can have this. So like for me, like the coaching education, like you've alluded to in your book and everything that you do now is like that's that's one way that I can see this industry progressing is if I can get people like you, people like I had Tracy Zimmer on a couple weeks ago as well, and it's like with these great coaches, like it comes nuances and new ways of thinking that you can use as a new coach to be like, okay, I'm not going to make perhaps some of the same mistakes as they did. I'm just going to listen to what they say and give a little to take a little. So I think that for me is a really important message too.
Yeah, and I think, like, if I could give, like, the biggest possible tip, my friend Elton Cochran in Texas, low blood pressure coaching.
Mm.
Um, just calm like, man, the amount of damage that I've probably done to my cardiovascular system in the first 10 years of my coaching career, immeasurable. Like, my nervous system's probably shot as well. It definitely is shot. But yeah, I mean, just, again, because we do have egos and because we do have textbooks and we do have technology and we do have, we're very passionate. Ultimately, it comes down to passion about what we do. We just invest so much and we invest, like, even like I said, like, I'm meeting these kids for the first time tomorrow, but like I've invested so much in their programming and so much in, putting that together that you just don't want to see it not done the way that you have it in your head. And so that creates a lot of frustration and that creates a lot of high blood pressure.
Hmm.
So, but I think we just, again, flexibility, calm down a little bit. Yes, there's still time, like, there's still a cause to get, like, riled up about stuff. Like, you're gonna get mad, but when you're finding yourself, like, mad and angry and anxious and frustrated and all that kind of stuff, more often than not, you probably, instead of looking at your environment, like, you probably need to reflect internally and decide whether or not, like, you are still a good fit for where you're at.
Mm.
Which is what's caused me to make some changes over time where it's like, I'm not doing what I need to do here. So that would be my biggest advice, is just, like, tone it down a little bit. Like, I get it, we're all hotheads, we like to squat, like, we like to listen to, like, our rage music, like, while we're doing that stuff, but you don't have to be that way all the time.
Yeah, it's that on. So for the 1 year episode, it was me and Brandon Chu, who was like the very first guest, and we spoke about like having a dimmer as coaches. It's like knowing when to dim it down when our athletes aren't feeling it. We'll just dim it down. And if they're feeling it, we could just bring that brightness right up to like match their energy. And it's all about that match. It's like if you really want to push today, let's go. But like I can be here for that. If it's a bit more of a sensitive day and you've had other stressors, let's tone it down.
Yep, that's a great analogy.
What was your favorite part about writing the book, personally?
Being done. No, it was, I think, honestly, it was like reading it. So, kind of the process was, I started it last August. I talked with Zach Dakin, like, in person. I was on campus for a meeting and he was like, Missy, you just got, like, stop messing around, write your book. And I'm like, oh, dang it. So I, like, go home, I put a post-it note on my computer that says, write the damn book. And, like, I looked at it for a couple days. I was like, all right, you put, it's a post-it note, so it's got to happen. So, I start writing it. December, it's done. I take it to an editor. I use Nathan, the editor with Simply Faster, because I knew he'd edited my articles before and I knew he wouldn't strip it of tone. He actually, like, toned it up in some spots. And so then, that's sent off. And then we start the process of getting all the graphics in and whatnot. And then, before you know it, it's July and I still don't have my proof copy, through some things we discussed before the show with marketing and the book designer and people not hitting deadlines. I hit my deadline. My stuff was done on Super Bowl Sunday, but whatever. So I get that proof copy back, like the actual hard copy, in my hand, because I've edited it so many times, like via PDF, that I'm like, I can't do it anymore. You've got to put a hard copy in my hands. And just, like, going back and reading it when I hadn't read it cover to cover
Mm.
since December or January, and going back and just being like, "Oh my gosh, I did this." Like, just being, and there were, like, some spots in the book where, after 20 years, you just know some things, right? And
Hmm.
they're so ingrained in you that you don't think about them. They're not even, like, on the surface, and sometimes people will ask me questions about things that are, it's just so basic to me that I, like, almost can't answer, right? That Einstein explaining to a 4-year-old, I can't, right? but the book forced me to do that. And so I just looked and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like, how did I say something so so smart,
Mhm.
right? How did I do
Yeah,
this?" And like even though I know it's my work, there were just some spots and like there are even spots in the book where I was like, "This is really funny." And like my mom texted me last night and she was like, "This section is hilarious." And I was like, "Right?" Because my mother is reading a strength and conditioning book right now. She doesn't know anything about it. But yeah, I mean, just like getting to and I still haven't like I just have this idea that one day I'm gonna find myself on a patio somewhere with my sunglasses on, like casually reading my book and feeling proud for my hard work. But I don't actually even own a copy right now. I'm sold out and waiting on the restock.
nice.
So it's
That's a
not
good
gonna
place to be.
happen. It's exciting, but also like I'm shipping it myself, so it's stressful. But yeah, I mean, I think just like sitting back and reading it was the most surprising, the most exciting piece. Because again, you just get and you're just looking at it. I wrote it chapter by chapter, and I did write it in
Mhm.
order, but you're just going through and looking at every piece under a microscope. So to sit back and like look at it and take it all in, start to finish, was like, wow, I really did something here.
Yeah, I think, and I suffer from imposter syndrome quite a lot. Whereas like I'm speaking to like elite level coaches, like people like I've looked up to my whole like career, and now they're coming on the podcast and asking to come on, and I'm just like, first of all, I shouldn't be talking to you. Like I I've done nothing. Like why are you giving me the time of day? But like that's exactly what that sounds like. Is like you've accomplished so much and put it into one resource that now you read and you're like, damn, like this is me.
Yeah, and I think I tweeted this a couple months ago. I was like, imposter syndrome was like for my 30s or something like that. Where it's like, yeah, I mean, we all number one, I think anybody that's good at anything, or anybody that wants to be good at anything, or anybody that holds himself to a high standard is gonna have a little bit of imposter
Mhm.
syndrome. And I think that's part of what stopped me from because I had this book outline done, I don't know, 3 years ago. But that stops us from putting out good content. And you have a lot of coaches that are afraid because of all the keyboard warriors to put out a resource or a post or a video. And it's like, just put yourself out there,
Mhm.
like, more than 90% of the human population. Like, go make our industry better by putting out quality content.
100%. I've actually so I read books, not just industry books. I like to read a variety of books, and there's a book that mentions exactly that. I'm just going to get it so people can see it. So it's called Show Your Work, and it's like it's a couple hours read, and it's exactly that. It's like we're so, and one of the things that it talks about is like we're so infatuated with the thing. It was like everything that I put out has to be well thought out and scientifically and methodology. I'm butchering the word. It has to be
Whatever.
like so sound that no one can pick it apart, and that actually hinders the process of making this great content. And like I read somewhere before is like waiting is a surefire way to killing that vision, that vibration that you had thought about. Like someone that vibration will come to someone else and they'll do it. So like just do it. Like and books like that really help to just be like, yeah, I'm not going to wait. I'm just going to put out. Like this is I just need to put it out.
Yeah, and you and I spoke before the show where it's like, I was talking about my video editing skills on social media. They're terrible. Like I don't know how to do reels. I don't know how to create something that's viral. Like my content's not any less good. It's just less salesy. Like here's your three-step sales and your three tips to be the greatest volleyball player ever and like all the gimmicky stuff. I'm just not into that. And I know like I could take the same content and make it better, right? And make it go viral and probably get more followers and all that kind of stuff. But right now at the point that I'm at, I don't have the bandwidth for that. So
Mhm.
it's like I'm putting out organic content. It's not overproduced. It's not sexy, but if you go look at it, you're going to get something out of it. So the followers that I am getting are going to be people that I'm cultivating a relationship with. I'm providing value for them. So maybe I don't have, 10,000 or 20,000 or 100,000 on Instagram. I don't really care. Like I'd rather have people that are like invested in my work and getting something out of it and actively using than people that get on and they're like, wow, this is really flashy and it has all the B-roll cut in and
Hmm.
and everything else. So at some point, would I like to get better at that stuff? Yes, but there's also some merit to the done is better than perfect mentality on certain facets
Hmm.
of your career and business.
I agree. I spoke to someone yesterday. He runs a business on cognitive training, and he was giving me like the principles to what he does, like social media wise. Like for him, is like he's spent so much money on like advertisement to get results right there and then, and he got them, but they didn't last. Where he's now just cultivating a presence in that area and focusing his advertising on just like making sure it's just in front of them and not so much buy sell, that he's actually seen more growth on this longevity plan as opposed to like I just want quick sales. And I think that's something that you're alluding on, like that your followers are there to get knowledge as opposed to just get some quick viral clips.
Yeah, and you also have to look at like what kind of customer do you want, right? Like, and there's no like if you want to go sell 4 weeks to jump 4 inches higher in your vertical program, cool. Like more power to you. But and that's your customer avatar. That's not mine. Like my customer avatar is going to be someone who wants to put together a plan for long-term development, not quick results. And that's fine. We're going after different markets, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with either, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm more on that plan. And I'm also more on the plan of, listen, let's get email addresses because the algorithm can change on a dime. And suddenly, like all of these, everything that you've done, like TikTok may go away, right? Everything that you've done just collapses because you're using exclusively social media.
What's your PR song?
Yeah, I was saying that it's a difficult question because I don't really lift heavy enough to PR anymore because my body's so old and broken. I think it depends on if it was an angry day. Any of my former coworkers are gonna die when they hear this, but my boss at TCU had a playlist of like 7 songs, and he played it every single day for 7 years. And there's a song, I think it's gosh dang, who's the artist? Is it Five Finger Death Punch or something? Bad Company.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, it just like reminds me of like everyone's like, I'll never listen to that song again. If I want to go squat heavy, I'm putting it on.
Nice. Just get you angry and fired up.
Exactly. Yes. I just like I channel like the rage from that time period in my life and I channel his energy and I turn on the song and just go lift.
Nice. What's your conditioning playlist look like?
I actually don't listen you know what? I do listen to I condition in my driveway, so I have a speaker in my
Mhm.
garage. What is on that playlist? I have a playlist called Don't Feel Like Lifting because I built it one day when I did not feel like lifting. So it is a wild mix of early 2000s hip hop,
Nice.
kind of some like current hip hop as well. There will be some pop mixed in there. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly hip hop.
Nice. See, I've I kind of hate that I like it now. Like when I came back from America, I now listen to so much country music, and it makes
Let's
me sick.
go.
It makes me sick because I used to hate it, but like experiencing like country people while I was there, I was like, all right, this is actually quite cool. This is sick.
Yeah, it just depends on the mood, but like I'll sometimes do a country music day when I'm lifting. So
Yeah, like it was like I'm really big into like all of our what's his last name? Oh, he's current. Zach Bryan, Coulter Wall as well. Like they're phenomenal. Like I'll blast that.
yeah, I'm more like an early, like to mid 2000s Texas country artist. So like Roger Krager, Cross Canadian Ragweed, like people you've never heard of. But that's just a function of living in the great state of Texas.
Yeah, I'll actually take those recommendations because I need to expand.
He's in advance because yeah, it's a little, if you haven't heard it, it's a little different.
Okay, okay, I'll look forward to it. I've got a 20-minute drive home, so it'll be fun.
Nice.
Um, what's some advice that you would give new strength coaches or coaches wanting to come into this industry?
It's got to be about more than liking to lift and more than
Mm,
liking to be a part of a team. It has to be athlete centric because if you're not coming from that perspective, you're not going to last very long. If it's just that you want to exercise and you think you get to wear shorts all the time and, train all day, then I mean, yes, we get to do those things, but there's a whole lot of other pieces that go into it that I don't think people are prepared for.
100%. Coach Mac actually has, he's told me this a bunch of times, but like through his internship, like you get pulled in so many different ways that you can see whether you want to stay in this industry or not. Like he's actually had people like completely move away from S&C and be like, I'm glad that I did your internship because it taught me that like I'm not cut out for that type of environment. So I think that's a really important message too. Is like sometimes it's okay to not just continue with something that you're not liking because of the demands of it.
Yeah,
On that,
and I
sorry,
yeah, I let me just interject this last point because I get this question all the time. I get the question of how do you survive as a female in the industry? And like, I've never said this publicly before, but I'm going to say it for the first time. If that's your primary concern, it's probably not for you, to be honest. Because it was never, my primary concern was never that I was female. My primary concern was like, how can I be better for my athletes? Now, certainly, can you lean on other females in the industry for support? Can you know, navigate some unique challenges that we face? Absolutely. But again, like if that's like your number one consideration, like maybe do some soul searching before, going down this path. And again, that's not to discourage anybody. That's just, I don't think that we can operate with a chip on our shoulder because of who we are as a person.
100%. I will tell you something at the end of the podcast. Um, yeah, but it's on that. But like, I agree. Like, I have asked female coaches like what's sort of their experience because like they're all like for me there's like a coach is a coach, like there's no difference at all if you are female, male, whatever you want to be. Cool, as long as you do your job and you do it well. I don't give a fuck. Like we're all in this industry for the same reason, and it's to make those athletes better. So like I agree. Like you don't like the gender is so what. Um, are can you let everyone know where they can get your book and where they can catch you on social media?
Sure. So they can go to either one of my two URLs, whichever is easier to remember, MissyMitchel-McBeth.com. Macbeth is spelled MCBETH, or D2D1book.com. And then my socials are at Missy M. McBeth.
So this is the website where you can get the book, and this is the Instagram. Thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us. Yeah, it was a pleasure and an honor to have you on as well.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. Peace.